Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second in our Ajento GDPR webinars. And today we'll be discussing around, as part of the overall messaging around getting ready for GDPR, is around how to get the best benefit out of GDPR and to as part of the journey that we're on. So we're just going to get a few more minutes and wait for a couple more people to come on. So we'll be back in a few moments. Thank you. Okay, so here we are, the second in our Ajento Webinar Series for GDPR. My name is Derek Owen. I'm joined by Santiago Castro and Peter Van Dam from Kiris. And as I said, this is the second in our 4 GDPR webinar series. The first one that we did back in July was what does GDPR legal requirements mean in practice? Today's is going to be around how to be compliant and gain real value before the 25th, 2018 cutoff date. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to literally move on to the next slide. As part of this, as I said, is around, I'm going to go through an introduction, what is GDPR and how it impacts your business, and then how to get ready for it. And be real compliant and gain real value from it. And then we're going to move on to some Q&As. We then have, as I said, some polls. We've got 3 polls today, and so hopefully you can partake in that and answer some of the questions, and so that gives us a good understanding about all of the audience on the webinar. So with that, I'd like to hand over to introduce you to Santiago and to Peter. So Santiago, over to you.
Thank you, Derek. Let's go to the next slide then. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Me and my colleague Peter will be taking you through our approach to get ready in the coming year that you have less than so actually. And this approach comes from our experience and taking different organizations around Europe and in the UK in the journey. So let's go to the next slide. I mean, very quickly, just to introduce you who we are. Kiros is a global organization that has been around for 20 years. We have been working with data for 20 years, so this is kind of our area of expertise, understanding data assets such as the personal data. We work in different countries, and therefore the GDPR, as you know, has implications in different countries. We have been working with companies that are all around Europe and even outside Europe that are interested in markets in Europe and therefore needs to be compliant. And we work in every different industry, and we work with also what we call the management transformation, which is helping them transform and become compliant in general to many regulations, but the GDPR is one of them. So this was just a quick snapshot of who we are. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm going to now take you through a quick introduction on what is the GDPR and how it impacts your business. I'm not going to be too long on that because we already had past sessions where we were looking at that, so it's going to be quick. But before that, a quick pause for a poll.
Great.
Over to you, Derek.
So just wanted to capture. I know some of the people on the call already might have been on the previous webinar, but I'll just open the poll. So what we're looking for is, where are you in the GDPR process? So if you wouldn't mind helping and giving us an understanding about where you are. So number 1, I don't know anything, I'm just starting out. I've read a bit about GDPR as number 2. Number 3, we've started looking at it, still confused. 4 is we know what we need to do, we're now in the planning. And 5 is finally fully know what we're doing and we're now implementing. So it's going to be a few more seconds to close, and we're going to close it now. Okay, and then I'll just share with you the results in terms of what you can see. And you can see here, in terms of the polls, we've got 21% saying they're just starting out, 21% around they've read up on it, need more info, and then a majority, kind of in that zone of actually we need more help. So Just going to finish that poll off and hand back to you. Let's have a quick look. I'm just going to hide it now, and then we can go back to the presentation. So back over to you, Santiago.
Thank you, Derek. So what are the risks? What is kind of in stake? What are the implications if as an organization you are not compliant? So you can be fined up to 20 million euros or 4% of the worldwide annual turnover of the organization, whichever is the highest. So there is a big economic implication. But some of the organizations that are talking to us are also sometimes even more concerned about the risk of damaging their reputation. And you know that the GDPR is all about, in a way, the law was created to create a good relationship with your customers and create that your customers trust you as an organization. So in that sense, the law is there to protect the rights of the customers and the privacy. But if you as an organization show that you can be trusted in holding their data, you will be able to serve them better, to create new products, to good service. I mean, the typical example of Amazon, when you buy something, you can have good suggestions of what else to buy, and those suggestions come upon the information that Amazon knows about your consumption patterns. So personal data, if is shared and handled in the right way, could provide better service to the customers. On the flip side, if customers don't trust you and feel that you're abusing with the data, or somebody can hack you and get your data, the personal data, and do any negative activity with that, then the damage of your reputation is going to be big, and you're going to start losing customers. And that is, I think, one of the biggest risk is that, of course, you start losing clients. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just very quickly to introduce you what are the key requirements. So this slide will really summarize in one snapshot all what the law is kind of asking. The first part is the privacy by design. So that pillar is about ensuring that the organization has the technical protection, basically that you put measures in place to be able to monitor the protection of the personal data against destruction, loss, dissemination, alteration of the personal data. You need to put a governance framework in place where you appoint a data privacy officer and someone that is accountable and responsible for looking after the processes and looking after the compliance in the long term, because of course you will get compliant in a point in time, but then you will need to continue that process to keep that compliance, and of course put the right level of security to consider the protection. The next pillar is what they call security by design, security by default, and this pillar is about minimizing the collected and retained personal data. Is a principle of limiting your risk and limit the storage in time that you have. The third pillar of this law is the data accountability. And here is about identifying, documenting, and justifying any personal data processing. And this is very important, the justification, because different businesses have different objectives and therefore will be able to justify differently why they are holding data. So as long as you know why you are holding data and why are you processing it in a way you can justify, then you are not at risk. And then only process the data that is related to that business purpose, and otherwise ask for explicit consent. The fourth pillar is the respect of the individuals, and this is where the law has a kind of a new ingredient. Now the individuals have new rights. They have the right to be informed about what organizations are doing with their own data, the personal data. They have the right to access the data, to rectify what is being done with their data, to object of certain processing of certain data, and what we call to be forgotten, or just to erase everything and to transfer their own data. So in that sense, they can call a regulator anytime if they feel that those rights are not being respected. And finally, the last pillar is the breach notification, and this one is about having systems to monitor if there is any security incident, and to manage that if there is a breach, that the organization needs to ensure to communicate to those individuals that were affected, those people that where the data was lost. They need to be notified within 72 hours. So it is important in that sense to have systems that allows you to understand what's happening in your security area and to be able to communicate. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is again coming back to the main idea of this law. Many people are seeing this as a pain, as a risk, as kind of a cost. I like representing the GDPR sometimes with this illustration. My doctor says that my hair loss is caused by me worrying about my data loss. But in fact, what we are seeing with many of our clients is that it's not that much a problem if you really do the right thing. It will be an opportunity. I was saying the spirit of the law is really to be able to prove that you are in control of the data that you hold, and therefore have better relationship with your customers because you can prove they can trust you. But also, and most importantly, we're seeing many projects of big data platforms or archive data or data that was sitting there that was not really being used. Well, by doing this exercise, organizations are starting to understand that they can get better insight, because if they can really master their data and have good data quality and actually be able to report and map the data they have, and therefore they can do better intelligence with that data to actually get more insights about their customers and therefore serve them better, and in a way increase the potential that of developing new products and services to their customers. So really is an invitation to see the GDPR as an opportunity to invest in your platforms to get again more control of your data and therefore more value of it. Let's go to the next slide. So now is to introduce the next section, how you will get ready for the GDPR, therefore.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thanks, Santiago. So 4 topics to tackle in getting ready for GDPR and having value from the regulation. Is first of all have a short look at the difficulties to achieve a certain level of compliancy, then 2 basic principles that we handle in our approach, which is explained as the last point, and some key milestones that are important for you. So what makes now the compliance to GDPR or data privacy in general difficult to achieve is basically the 2 things. As you can see, the more flows you have in your company, flows of personal data, the more flows you have, the more people or stakeholders or departments or organizations that are available or impacted by GDPR or available in your company, the more complex that your privacy management program will be. So if you have a complex program to tackle, you will need quite a number of skills to be involved in this program. Some skills required, they are listed all on the slide, but important skills will be legal for sure, will be your security guys that need to be in place, your executive sponsors, your processing guys. So all those type of skills are required to set your steps into the compliance journey. So can we move to the next slide, please? So taking these difficulties into account, we should tackle the compliance journey as a holistic from a holistic point of view. So that's the first principle that we take into account. So holistic means, in our point of view, end-to-end. End-to-end, starting from an assessment, followed by an implementation of the GDPR project from all aspects. So it doesn't mean that we only look at the legal point of view. We don't look only at security point of view. We should look at all the aspects, meaning also the personal, how we will manage the personal data. It's quite important that we have a good view on that one, in line with what is required by the legal authorities. And also, if you have a large company or a complex program to tackle, technology is very likely an accelerator, so that you can speed up things by using technology as an accelerator. So, and therefore, at Kirus, as Santiago explained, we have the data in our DNA, data management in our veins, so that we can tackle all the personal data management stuff and technical accelerators that we master very well. And we count on the privacy office to focus on the legal and IT security aspects. So taking this partnership between those our two companies makes us very strong here in tackle the journey towards GDPR compliance from an end-to-end aspect. Can move to the next slide, please. Then, so holistic means, already said, we start with legal experts and privacy consultants. Afterwards, we look at how we will tackle security with a security consultant and also privacy experts. But very likely, the more complex your program will be, you need a business process analyst. You will certainly need a project manager, and also change manager would be good, as you might change quite a lot of things in your organization to be compliant. And last type of roles that are very important is then, okay, if you have data, you need to govern your data, so you need your data governance experts, and you also need to have, let's say, the data architect, the people that can design your personal data management architecture, or which tools to be included. So that are typically the 8 type of roles that will be involved into a GDPR compliance program. So from a holistic point of view, we zoom in a bit on so to start with the journey on 2 dimensions. 2 dimensions. The first dimension in the compliance is focused on your organization as such. So before diving into the second dimension, we need to look at which are the things that need to be put in place from an organization point of view to set the first steps into compliance. So first dimension will be focused on accountability. So who in the organization is accountable? How far is the accountability going of the people in the organization? Before diving into the second dimension is looking at the processing of data. Processing of data, like you see, you have different types of data that you process in the company. You have, for example, your employees. You process employee data to pay their salary. So that's a type of processing that you need to take into account into the assessment. So that's looking at compliance from a processing point of view. So taking the accountability and the processing point of view, looking at those 2 dimensions, you are on a good track to reach a good level of compliance with the GDPR. 100%, it might be very difficult to obtain. That's not the purpose. Therefore, you should look at what the risk you have, the risk you encounter. So if we zoom in on the next slide, please. The first dimensions on the organization level. If we zoom on that one, then we have typically these 6 actions to take. So first action, depending on the size of the organization, you could appoint a DPO, so a data privacy officer. So data privacy officer that is driving the GDPR compliance roadmap, or a project manager. So at least you should have somebody who is in the driving seat of this program. A second point will be the registration of all the activities that you are doing with the data, the personal data. So you build an inventory of your data processing. Based on this, you look at an action plan, a basic action plan to put some prioritizations in place. So that's the third action you take on organization level. And then you can start managing the risks for each of the actions you have, of each of the activities you will take, will be driven by which risk your company will might face in the future. So if you have a look at the view of risk, you can start implementing your policies, procedures, process. So you get organized, in fact, to how you comply with GDPR, and then you start document your compliance so that you can prove to the authorities that you really are compliant. Because if you get a complaint from one of your customers or suppliers or a former employee, you should show to your local organization or regulation authority that you have taken the necessary actions to be compliant. So that's the first dimension to look at. So your accountability of your organization. Once this has been put in place, you look at really the compliance itself of each of the data processing. So this will be a risk-based focus that you will take. You will start looking at the processing of your data from a risk point of view. So this is based on the Europrise methodology, which takes four types of processing and activities in this compliance set. So the first is having some fundamental principles in place. And secondly, look at your legal basis to take the next actions. Then look at your security measures, and then, like Santiago told, look at what is the rights of the specific data subjects in place. If you zoom in firstly on the fundamental principles that you should start with on the next slide, then what is important there, that you should have you can process your data in a transparent way, in a fair way, so that you have you don't process data for the art of data processing, because it should be in line with the purpose of why you want to process data. Purpose mean, for example, with the calculation of your salary of the employees, you need a certain type of data to be able to calculate that. So that's a really concrete purpose of using the employee data. You should also look, okay, how accurate your data should be. Now we are going fast. We are already on the next step. One back, another one back, please. Yeah, so that you cannot store your data without any boundaries of limits. You should put some limits in place in there. Some confidentiality, you should look at that and be sure that it remains integrity, and that you have the good accountability as a fundamental principle. So that's fundamental things you should start with. And a second point is the legal basis. So for every processing of the data, you need to have a legal basis of how to treat the data. And if required, you should ask to your data subject a certain consent so that they can prove that you might use the data. And you always should really inform in a good way, in a transparent way, how you will process data, for what you will use it, and be very clear in that. It's not be a long text on your website that is that nobody is reading. It should be clear and very focused on the data that you are asking from the person. Once this is in place, then we can move to the next slide and look from a technical or organization point of view. Look at the scope. What scope of data will you secure, and then look at what is the impact, the possible impact on the privacy of the data subject, to start putting in place some appropriate measures. So that is then more from an implementation point of view. And then the last step to take is in there, okay, we look at the rights of the data subject, so the rights of your supplier, the right of your clients, they are all listed in there. The right to be informed, to be accessed, to be forgotten, the right to ask the data you have. So there are certain rights which will be the driving force behind your risk assessment, because if a data subject feels that his rights are not fulfilled, he might take a complaint to your company. So that is really the driver of your risk assessment that will be used here.
Okay, we're just going to go to the second poll, just to have a quick sort of break, if that's all right. In terms of understanding, based on the slides that you've gone through, both yourself and Santiago, how more aware are you in terms of being compliant and gaining real value? So I've just launched the poll, so if everybody could just give us a little reply. So yes, I think so. I think I know how to be compliant. Yes, it's very clear now. No, not sure. And then also, no, I'm still quite confused. So we'll just keep that going for a few more seconds. And then, as I said, there's only 3 polls in this version. So let's close that one off now, and then let's share the results. And as you can see from that, we've got quite a large number saying yes, they are very much aware. And then at the same time, we've also still got a number of people who are still not, sure of the impact, and also slightly confused. So let's move back to the slides, and then we can move on from there and carry on. So back over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Eric. So we have before looked at the principles of how we should start with the assessment. Okay, that are the basic principles and dimensions we should look at. But now, very concretely, how we want to approach this. So if we start with the GDPR journey, what is our approach to set the steps? Steps meaning, okay, we will look at, again, 2 dimensions, accountability and the compliance of the processing. And then if you look at our approach, if you click on the next slide, therefore accountability, we should put in place a privacy management program and to achieve the accountability. And then in the approach focused on the next point on processing compliancy. Yeah, I think we should click quite a lot now on the next slide. Then we have the complete picture. So you see a growing step of compliancy on GDPR, starting from the first dimension on the awareness at the top, at the bottom, making everybody aware of what is GDPR, starting with registration of your risk of which data is processed, which data is used. Then zoom in, okay, what is now really the risk, what are the different risks we have, and then analyzing, okay, how risky we have. What is now the risk that, for example, a supplier is taking complaints towards our company? What is the risk that the customer is suing us? So that does really look, okay, what is the risk we run as a company to get a complaint? And based on that, you will take the next steps. Say, okay, what are now the tools that are required? What should we put in place? Tools, meaning from a broad perspective, not only technology, but also the processes and the procedures that you should put in place based on a certain action plan. and then you start implementing those tools. So tools focused on the accountability of the organization. Tools, once this is implemented, you start with the go live training of all the stakeholders of your GDPR program. And once the level of accountability compliance is obtained, you can start working on your processing compliancy. So step by step, you will analyze each of the data processes and identify the risk and start working on the compliancy processing by processing. So that's the steps with each of the two dimensions. If you look at the next slide, zoom in on the 4 steps that we take, 4 steps in our approach to make this different activities working. Yeah, you can click on everything. So first step is mobilize. Mobilize the organization, meaning that you should create a broad awareness, first of all, at executive level, because you might need to inform them, might need to make them aware if they are not aware yet, so that they are make some plans and budgets ready to start working, to start kicking off this program. So you should start with awareness, start to plan, start to prepare the next steps. The first immediate step will be make your inventory of your personal data. So you make a list. You can do it either in a manual way or in a more automated way. We always recommend to start in a very manual way if you have a limited set of activities. So manual way from a high level point of view, and then zoom in maybe on an automated point of view for the more detailed processing inventory. So based on this inventory, you identify your different processes with a high likelihood of risk, and based on that, you start making a first version of your action plan. So first version meaning that you look at, okay, what are the high level steps we should take before diving into the more detailed activities, more detailed risk analysis, and detailed planning of your next level of compliancy. So the first thing that you will tackle there in the risk analysis is making a data protection impact assessment. So an assessment of what is now the impact of the risk on your organization, and based on that, making a blueprint of your GDPR activities, or how your architecture should look like. Now, building up a journey, a GDPR compliance journey, you should look at let's say risk and priorities. So we used to work a lot with the priority plot to drive other data management journeys. Also for GDPR, we use a priority plot to start to plot all your different activities that you should take to make you compliant, and start working on the let's say the high impact activities to start with. So that is the driver of your action plan. Action plan, you can say final, but it might always, a plan is never final in my opinion. So you always should make should adjust your plan based on new insights. So once your plan is there, you can start with the real transformation of the organization from the 5 point of views. There's from a legal point of view, taking your actions from an IT security point of view, from a more general organization and process point of view, and also how you manage your personal data in more specifically. Once this is in place, you always should have your monitoring. You should monitor how your compliance is being fulfilled, and that you can still take your required actions, because it's not that you are compliant at a certain moment that this compliancy continues. You should always continue to monitor your compliance level. And there, like I said before, change will happen. Your organization things will change, your processes will change. So change management and training around is very important here to make this transformation happening. So if we have this done, we can say, okay, we have now explained our approach, how you should grow into your GDPR compliancy with the key milestones as a kind of a resume, a wrap-up of what is now the steps to take. If you can move to the next slide, please. So key milestones will be awareness, very important, that you have an organization-wide awareness, that you have your data processing inventory, so have your list of which data is processed in your organization. Identify for each of these data processes what is now the risk that we have, to make then a good impact assessment based on this list, and then you can start your prioritization of your steps to take, and then based on that you start your transformation and growth plan to the GDPR compliancy, and then you go live, and then you set your step growth into the accountability, that you can say, okay, we are a champion in or a compliance champion into GDPR. So that's in a short recap of the key milestone that we look at when implementing our GDPR program.
Excellent. So we'll just finish off. There's just a few more slides left. This is the final poll, and really this is just to get an idea of everybody on the webinar, just to give us some feedback on the second webinar. So just some questions, Q&A stuff at the end of it. How helpful was the webinar? Excellent, but need some more help. Great work, but I think I knew most of it. Not that much. I'm already in the process. Not that much, because I really do need help. So have a look on there if you mind for a few seconds. Give us some feedback, and then we're going to close the poll now. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll just share with you the results. So in there you can see that there's a really good, helpful information. As you know, hopefully you know that there's actually another 2 webinars that are taking place over the next few months. In particular, we've got the effective journey to implement. So what is the journey that you need to go on? And that's in September, Thursday the 14th. And then also a webinar for how to build a business case for GDPR and gain buy-in along the way. So I just want to go on to just really see if there's any questions that have come up. There's a couple that have come up already. One of them that's come through is who's the local regulator in the UK? I think that's probably Santiago. Probably who is the main regulator in the UK that will be doing all of these tests and kind of sessions where they go around and do some auditing?
Yes, there is actually an appointed regulator. Is a good question, because although there is a government body that has been appointed, the main question also around this is how this regulator is going to work, because the complexities are that individuals' rights, as we name them, allowed any person to ask and call that regulator to go and do an audit and take action. So that means many things. That means that the regulator will be working on the basis that there is a complaint, but also means that many people who complain because there is not a cost to call the regulator, which means that there are different scenarios. Either organization may see a snowball effect. If it is a big organization and some customers start being unhappy, they may call this regulator, and then there may be an increased numbers of demands and firefighting, and that could be a real crisis. On the other hand, there is also the argument that this regulator will also have maybe too much of a task trying to follow all the complaints from different unhappy customers or unhappy people calling for the action. So maybe the real actions are going to be taken, and the fines only for certain big cases or certain type of cases. So we don't know exactly how it's going to work, and that we will see in practice. but there is this kind of more pessimistic scenario and an optimistic scenario. We'll see, and in any case, what I would say is that the more trust you can give, the less the problem will become a big snowball effect, and I think the regulator will stay out of that type of activity with your organizations.
So do you think then, Santiago, that there'll be a pent-up kind of level of people that are waiting for this date to put their kind of issue forward?
Yes, well, there has been already even some abuses. Even there has been some spams that I heard the other day. A client of us telling us that there were even spams of people trying to even blackmail, saying that they would announce unless they pay X and they could avoid the fine. So yeah, definitely all these scenarios could take different shapes, and they are even appointing a new section of the regulator to just look at abuses on the system. So definitely there are people waiting and see how they will use the system.
Okay, we've got another question here as well. Would a CRM such as something like Salesforce or an equivalent be useful to improve data protection? And is that more around? I sort of see that as being more around the process, isn't it? Around understanding that you've communicated out to people. What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely, yes. CRM systems are one of the key data sources. CRM systems are places where, by definition, you hold your customer records in there, and there are most of departments like salespeople or marketing people within organizations are very keen to keep those CRM systems, up to date and in good shape and with really good quality, so they can interact with their customers well. But on the flip side, they need to also be careful not to abuse of them and only interact with their customers in the way they have had the explicit permission. So processes around that, understanding on the implications of how you use those systems, and of course tools. There are many tools that allows you to profile those systems. Many organizations have even multiple CRM systems, and therefore understanding what personal data is in the different CRM systems that they have in order to be able to link them. Imagine you have a customer that asks you to retrieve your information, and you only look at one CRM system, but you were actually holding more information of the personal data in other CRM systems. You need to be able to link all the systems to the same personal record in order to be able to master it and then retrieve it.
So Santiago, so on the line, given that we kind of mail out about 1 million emails a month, basically, out for clients, what do you see there? I mean, obviously the process is that people have to consent as of the 25th of May. I mean, they're supposed to now, but a large number of companies, mail out illicit emails, etc. But there is a large number of companies who will have to go through that process between now and the 25th of May and gain consent. And that consent, does that have to be, proven consent? That has to be some form of documented, or they clicked a box on a mailing campaign. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There is going to be different ways. When Peter was showing the different steps, he was showing that you need first to have a legal kind of advisor to in a way recommend the best way to formulate that consent, because it could be tricky if you have, say, a web page where you say filling this form and a little sentence below saying, by the way, with this you give consent. That may not be the right way of asking it. You actually need to be able to explicitly give the option to opt in and opt out. And if you don't have that, actually by putting that sentence, you actually are doing nothing. So this type of legal advice, are you really doing it in the right way, is important. Then in the next step, that next steps that Peter was showing, you then need to also start changing systems, and it is exactly what you're saying. Maybe sometimes sending emails, maybe sometimes changing your web interfaces, how you actually design them and wrote the different sentences and allowed spaces to opt in and opt out. Maybe even your cookies policy. If you have cookies there, you need to change all those, let's say, more of technical interfaces that you have. So all these, let's say, areas you need to revisit. And then exactly what you are saying, what are you doing with it? Where are you holding that information that proves that you ask for consent? Similarly, like in your CRM systems, you have personal data, you will have to match somewhere the consent that you obtain per the customer or the employee that gave you that consent. So in a way, you will have to create links between the CRM system and the other system where you are holding those consents in order to be able to report it if an audit was coming to show, well, here is how I can transparently prove that in this place I hold data, but in this place I ask for the permission, and therefore you can prove it.
So really, there's a kind of a process where, people, companies that are managing data in any way, shape, or form, whether it be their customers, whether it be their prospects, etc., they should really be going through a process starting soon to communicate out and start to ask for permission. Having that stored, because as we know, you can send a number of emails and still people won't really read it or see it. So is this what you're saying, is that really companies should start really addressing it now rather than waiting till sort of early new year and hoping for the best?
Yeah, definitely. I will even say, if anything you have to do, at least do a proper analysis and mapping of all the risks you have, all the areas and the scope and the systems you will need to cope with, have a high level mapping. And once you have that high level mapping, create a plan, how long it will take you to get there to be compliant, and then make a conscious decisions. Okay, I can relax, I do have time, and I can take it easy, or actually I know that this is going to become a big issue, and don't wait to at least have an informed decision rather than just a wait and see and only act upon pressure or threat, or actually a problem that already started if you got any breach or anything like that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I think really we'll call it time now. We've got about 5 minutes left. So just to let everyone know, again, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Santiago, for your input. We are running, obviously, 2 other webinars, Thursday the 14th of September and Tuesday the 10th of October. You'll get a notification of the webinar recording, whoever's attended, and please have a click and register for the next 2 as well. So anything else you'd like to cover off, Santiago or Peter?
Well, just thank you very much, everyone, and again, an invitation to reach out if you have more questions. And of course, we're here to help in that journey, and we hope that this was useful for you, and we answer part of the questions and gave you a good overview.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Santiago.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.